Good morning, everyone. We have been able to sort the technology. For those that were on scheduled to come onto this session a good few weeks ago now, I apologise hugely. It was all to do with the way that I'd set it up. It wasn't a LinkedIn error. I'll take full ownership, responsibility and accountability for that. So if you're watching, welcome to today's session. We're going to be focusing on CRM. We're going to get into what we're going to be covering shortly, but welcome. As always with these sessions, let's make them interactive. Okay, so it's 11 o'clock on a Monday morning. I'm sure you've got a million things to be doing. So if you're joining today, James has got the priorities right. He's got coffee in hand. Let's make this interactive. Throw questions at James and I so that you can really take some valuable lessons from today. Let's just do some very brief intros. For those that aren't familiar with myself, my name's Phil Budd. I'm a business coach and business growth specialist based just outside Bury St Edmunds, helping businesses in the main to take their business to the next level. And a lot of instances that can be about how we structure a business in a way so the business owner can create more time for them and their family and put good structure and processes in place so the business is running without them. That's me. James, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning. My name's James Davey. I'm one of the directors here at the Armoury. We're an agency based in Norwich, specialising in everything kind of e-commerce, digital related. We do everything from strategy, creative and marketing for kind of quite a few high street and growing aspirational retailers.
Very good. Well, good to have you with us, James. James is my go-to person when it comes to CRM, okay? I've used him within my own business and he's helped clients of mine as well. And I think the subject matter of CRM is an interesting one that comes to the head at different points. But I think that particularly over the last 12 to 18 months with growth with a lot of businesses from an e-commerce perspective, but also within wider markets, CRMs come more to the fore again. Would you agree with that, James? What are you seeing? Let's get some
completely. Yeah, I think CRM has always been there as, you know, if you think back to catalog and telemarketing days kind of 20 years ago when I first kind of 20 or 30 years ago, when I first started really kind of doing marketing, then, you know, it's always been there. And the ability to create a database and create that customer relationship has always been prevalent. The bit which I think over the last 18 months or 2 years has come through even further is that remote nature of you haven't necessarily had the benefit of that one-to-one physical interaction with clients or customers that have not been there. So we need to find a way of keeping customers engaged, keeping them brought into and bought into the brand that you've created. So CRM and then the ability to talk to those consumers via different channels is really, really important. The one thing I think we just need to really just kind of identify is CRM is not the process of sending necessarily. It is part of the process, but the CRM is the entire gamut, from the capture of the data, the cleaning, the identification and the categorization of that data, and then understanding what parts of that data you can legitimately send to people to keep them engaged. And CRM almost covers that entire gamut. So if you think about the last 18 months or 2 years, capturing those people through the pandemic, working them hard, I'll use it, you have to, talking to those users to keep them engaged is really one of the biggest outputs.
Yeah. So in like 10 seconds, if you can, because those watching today's session and on the live session or on catch up as well, in your understanding, how would you describe CRM at its simplest core? What is CRM?
So CRM in it is literally what it stands for. So customer relationship management. It is the ability to capture, nurture, and engage customers through the mechanism of data capture, data enrichment, and good quality segmentation and sending targeting effectively. And that in an essence is what CRM is.
Brilliant. And we're going to get into today with a discussion about how you can use this effectively to grow your business, because I think one of the things that I see a missed opportunity of around CRM is not only about going out and gaining new clients and nurturing your existing leads, but also how you use it to effectively market existing clients. And I know we've talked about this before, James. There's huge opportunity out there that once you've brought those leads and customers on board, actually how you manage them within that, which we'll get into. Just from a sort of a headline viewpoint then, in terms of the options that are out there within the marketplace around CRM, what sort of options are around there? And if we want to categorize these based on the different levels that people can go in at, because, you know, with all sorts of software, there's a price point that's going to affect certain businesses. So do you want to just give us a flavor of what's out there in the market at the moment?
Yeah, so let's start at the very basic end of the market. And to run a CRM, you can do it from an Excel spreadsheet and Microsoft Outlook. If you absolutely have to, I'd never condone it at the moment, considering there are tools out there that do that for you. But in essence, a CRM can be done from an Excel spreadsheet of contact data and an Outlook kind of email client or whatever client you particularly use. So you can go all the way through the gamut, all the way up to the other end, to the likes of an Oracle or an SAP or whatever, which have effectively a big CRM platform as part of their business suite. Now, where we're probably talking about today is kind of in this kind of SME mid-section kind of area. So MailChimp, let's use that as an example. That is a very reasonable starting point for an e-commerce business to consumer CRM tool, the ability to capture data, churn that data through, segment it, and then ultimately send communiques to that customer. Now, we'll also talk about the likes of ActiveCampaign, which is another platform that does a little bit more. It manages a sales pipeline. So therefore, if you are a lead generating business, whether you're a plumber, electrician, or a kind of a B2B business, you're going to need a pipeline tool, something that shows you where your sales people are in your sales process and work their way through. So ActiveCampaign is such a platform that combines that sales pipeline, data capture, and the ability to email and SMS people off the back of that as part of a communication. You then move into the space of HubSpot, which is a very, very common platform that everyone is probably kind of front of mind in the marketplace. They also do a very similar thing, but they're becoming bigger and bigger as the time goes on. But they also deal with the likes of connectivity into your marketing platforms. They also deal with the likes of service-based tickets, of inquiries coming in for ticket resolution, all those kind of things. And as a business, it allows you to almost build a website in their platform if you so choose to. The difference is you're now starting to add on cost as you go through the pipeline. So there are plenty of CRM platforms out there. There are a few others I'd probably throw into the mix. One is one called Pipedrive. Now, Pipedrive is a fantastic sales pipeline tool, which can connect into the likes of an ActiveCampaign or a MailChimp, for example, for doing email campaigns out. And it can also bolt directly into your Gmail and Outlook system as well for sending emails, not en masse, but on a one-to-one, one-to-a-few kind of basis. So, you know, depending on where you start in the mix, there are probably more out there than I care to mention. Sendinblue, Omnisend, Emarsys, Ametria. God, I could go on. There are plenty out there that kind of operate, but they all fit different use cases. So it's very important to find one or more than one platform that does the thing that you need specifically for that job.
So, well, that links in with another question. And again, we talked about this at length privately, but also on sessions you've done for some of my clients around choosing the right CRM. What's some of the key components that a business should be considering? Because if you're a high growth business watching today's session, and please comment, add questions into today's session, even if you watch this on catch up. If you're growing and that rate of growth is 20-30% year on year and you're growing at such a rate, how do you factor in what CRM you need now, but also consider what you're going to need in the future? Because there's challenges, right? And I know it's a bit of an impossible question. But I know you can answer impossible questions.
Here goes. Let's try. So one of the biggest things you need to consider is the long-term cost of operating and scaling a platform. So many platforms get costed in various different ways. But the common denominator is the volume of contacts and people that you have in that data frame, in that database, effectively. So as you scale your business, if you're adding 2,000 to 5,000 people a year, or 10 to 20 to 30,000 a year, which is not uncommon for some kind of retail businesses, then your monthly operational cost is going to increase quite heavily. Now, the one thing I do want to point out is that CRM tends to have the best or if not one of the best returns on investment. So even though it may seem like a reasonably high cost, the ability to pay back on that cost is actually quite not straightforward, but it's much easier than paid media and all that kind of stuff. We can come back to that later. So the first one is definitely the long-term cost. Think about the volume of contacts you're going to be adding into your database each year and consider what that looks like at the end of year 3, because that's probably how long you need to stay with a CRM to start using it. The second bit is the modularity. So how can you bolt on different modules into the platform as you grow? So don't start with everything, because that is the nature of human beings and people like me who are like magpies. Oh, that looks nice over there. That does some pretty shiny stuff. Oh, nice. And I'm off. I will then probably use 10% of what I've just paid for the next 2 years. So I've effectively paying for 90% of doing bugger all. So make sure that you can either add on modules, or that what you're buying into, you are going to use 50% or more of its capability from day one, because that means you're going to get best payback. The third and final piece is around its interconnectivity. So how easily and simply does it connect with other platforms? So therefore, the ability for you to find the right solution for your business. Let's say you run Xero as an e-commerce platform, as an accounting platform. How does it integrate with Xero? So therefore, you're not entering data for customers twice. You enter a customer, move it in your pipeline to one in your CRM system. It creates a contact within Xero that is there and ready for you when you start raising your invoices. There are things that the interconnectivity is really important, because it will save you time, energy, and money further down the line as you continue to grow. They're the kind of 3 things: long-term cost, modularity, and interconnectivity.
Yeah, it's interesting. And something that I'm seeing at the moment, there's a lot of M&A activity going across sectors at the moment, huge opportunities out there. And one of the key things that I think is underestimated, I'm interested to get your view on this, James, from the businesses that you deal with, is actually it's very attractive to a potential buyer. They see the CRM as a massive asset within in any business. So if you are at that scaling up stage, but you've still got stuff on spreadsheets, an acquiring business that at some point you do want to sell are going to look at that and say, well, actually, does that carry a certain amount of risk? Because in terms of how you're managing your data, A, is it compliant? But secondly, in terms of scaling the business and opportunity, that can be an element of risk. What are your thoughts around that? Do you share that view?
Absolutely. So I will, it's not a secret. So when I used to run the multi-channel team at Jules, and we went through the purchase process of that business. So we looked for external investment. The number was about 35 million. That's an openly visible number in the media. One of the key delimiters of the reason why they agreed to pay that value for the business was because of the size of our customer database, but more importantly, the active nature of that database, the percentage of those people on that database that were active buying, and we knew everything about those customers. So everything we do with brands that are in a startup phase or in an exit phase or preparing for exit, customer due diligence is a really, really important part that most M&A companies, mergers and acquisitions businesses will go through. What is the quality of your data? How fast are you growing it? How active is it? And therefore, how fast can they flip that business by activating those customers in that database? So it is more and more important than it's ever been to build a quality database within your business, and the ability to see it and track it and monitor it.
Yeah, good practical examples. I appreciate that share, James. Thinking about what you said earlier about measuring the ROI, the return on investment for CRM, and you mentioned it being one of the easiest things to track. How do you measure that? And I appreciate that for every business, what they want to get out of the CRM is going to be different. But what are some of the ways you can measure that to see that you're getting an ROI?
So let's start with a really simple one. So let's start with a business that's selling online. So they are selling online or they're selling in store, because you can track both. So let's imagine you have something such as Shopify. We love that platform as an e-commerce platform. You can use it as Shopify POS and your online store as well. So therefore, we have a single view of the customer. So what that means is we can send a campaign email out to, let's say, 10,000 people, and we can track the people that open, click, which bits on that email they click, which pages they then visit the site afterwards, and then purchase that product directly from that email click or a number of hours after viewing that particular email. Now, that's a really straightforward use case of click, buy, cash. Generally, we see around about 35 to 1 return. So every pound you spend on sending those emails out, we expect about 35 quid to come back in terms of revenue. So it is, when you think that Facebook, we're now struggling in reality to see a return on ad spend of 1.5 to 2.5 reported in their tool, you're talking significant multipliers. I was going to do the maths, but my brain can't compute yet. So there we go. So that's a really, really simple one. That isn't a use case for most people. Lead generation is probably the most common one in a B2B environment where you don't get a physical sale online or that kind of ilk. So what you want to know is the people that have arrived at your site through either Facebook links, all those kind of marketing activities. How many people arrive at your site? How many then convert into a marketing qualified lead? How many then progress into a sales qualified lead? And then how many of those physically convert into a purchase or a sale of a product or service? Now, with a CRM, you can track that all the way through. So therefore, you can track the people coming in, people that go into your pipeline, what stage of the pipeline they're in, and then at what stage they started buying into you as a business or a service. That way you can say, well, I spent £2,000 per year or £1,000 a month on this CRM platform. I am now tracking all this data and I can see who's come into my business, and I can see that I've made a 10 to 20 to 1 return on those particular customers. Now, an ROI on CRM for B2B is much harder because you could be selling a widget for £1 or a service for £20,000 a month. So it's very, very difficult to kind of give you a definite ROI on what you should be looking at. But it's actually it is very possible to track that through from one end to another using a CRM where you can track visitors and data being captured on your website.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would add to that, and you made me think about my own business and what we've implemented in our coaching business. It's easy to underestimate the leverage that a CRM creates, and most importantly, the consistency you get with your sales process.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that when you're scaling a business, particularly when the communication process during the sales and marketing process is very manual, it's hard to get consistency because people are involved, and it's hard to scale it because it involves people. What have you seen around that? I know you've helped me massively with my own CRM. What have you seen it outside of working with other businesses in terms of the leverage and the consistency it drives as another value add? I mean, it's harder to measure the ROI specifically on that, but it is a key benefit, isn't it?
Well, I think it's the cost of time lost, isn't it? So if you are able to go from a sales team of 3 people to a sales team of 1.5 by purely automating and streamlining your communication process and the way the data's flowing through your CRM, it's very easy to say, well, actually, by putting in a CRM that cost me £1,000 a month, I've now saved myself £2,500, £3,500 per month on salaries. Very straightforward. So it's the cost of loss of time in many ways. So therefore, the cost of not putting in a CRM and automating that process is effectively the loss of, 1.5 members of staff that you're having to continue to employ in order to facilitate the same level of service. And to be quite honest, not being completely sure in terms of whether any one of them is actually delivering the quality that you need coming out of the system, because it's all a manual Outlook, Gmail, email kind of process. Whereas at least with a CRM, you have complete transparency, or you should have complete transparency of number of emails sent, number of meetings set up, number of phone calls made, the outcome of those phone calls, and ultimately the conversion rate per salesperson using that CRM in order to understand, are they picking the right people to target at the front? Are they talking to them in the right way throughout the process? And are they able to close a sale?
Well, let's move it on then, because one of the objections that people may have around CRM and potentially keeping it in a more staff orientated environment where the staff are doing it manually is around personalization, and technology has moved on massively in the last few years, specifically around that, right? So if I said to you, do you know what, James, one of the fears that I've got around implementing the CRM is, how do I personalize my communications? What would be your response to that? Because some watching today's session will be maybe thinking that.
Yeah, my initial response is don't be lazy. So the ability to set up a CRM and fire and forget an email where it dynamically drops in the company name or it drops in the name of the salesperson that's been responding to that email is fantastic until you realize that you haven't set up a default. So if a company name doesn't exist or the company name says James Davey Incorporated brackets, Jesus Christ, don't talk to these Muppets, close brackets, then the minute that email goes out, then it's going to have some really nice implications for you. But it's about don't be lazy. Personalization is completely possible. And it is possible at some scale. I don't believe in 100% personalization because you don't have that human element in between. You need to, when you're in a sales process, as you coach many times, is about understanding your recipient implicitly, understanding what their trigger points are, understanding the things that make them tick. That means in your sales communications, they're relevant to that particular user. And that can even be going through their LinkedIn profile and finding out they like Simon Sinek and going, actually, oh, great, we've got an affinity with Simon Sinek. Have you seen this latest video he's posted? So personalization is great, and what it can do is create the top half of the email and the bottom half of the email with you being able to fill in the extra 2 minutes of finding out something that makes that person tick. The bit I don't advocate is blanket bombing hundreds of thousands of people with the same sales email or engagement email going, dear James, don't touch these guys, they're Muppets, comma, really great to see you at, enter event name here. It's just don't be lazy. I'm sorry. It's a fundamental flaw, but it's very easy to do.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I remember getting an email not so long ago, and you can tell it was an automated email. They got my name wrong. They called me by someone else, and
Nice.
Tim, actually. I mean, nothing wrong with the name Tim, but I'm not Tim.
Sandra.
But you take examples like that, and they must spend quite a lot of money on their CRM, and you look at that as an auto. You've completely done so much damage. Whether you're a customer or non-customer. Even worse if I was a customer, wouldn't it be, right? If as a cold lead, it's one thing.
Completely.
If you get it wrong,
that's a simple selection again, going through and sending an email and going exclude customers or include customers, down to the segmentation of your database and making sure you have clusters of users. That if you're talking about personalization, it's not just about the emails that are going out, but the personalization of the segments you're creating to say, well, actually, this customer does buy cheese and they buy it on Wednesdays and they like camembert. Nice. I've now got a very distinct niche cheese segment that I can send an email out to. What you don't want to do is send everything to all prospects and drop your customers into the same pot, because they could be getting a deal that they didn't buy in the first place, and they now want a discount. They could be being told about something that they blatantly have they're in a process of complaining about, which is often a case. The one thing I love about a CRM is, just as a very quick start of 10 quick action you can take today, any customer that's in a complaint procedure with you, put into a distinct user group in your CRM and exclude them from all marketing campaigns, because the last thing you want is to tell someone about some great new fantastic product or service that's coming out at the point that they're trying to tell you that you're not doing a great job yourself. It's just fueling fire. And it's something I always advocate any client starting with us, they do immediately. Anyone in a customer service query or a complaint procedure, stick them in a separate list and exclude them from all communications until it's closed, and then they'll be your best customers.
Yeah, great share. Let's just pause for a moment, because there might be those that didn't join us at the start but have just joined on the live session. My name's Phil Budd. I'm with James Davey from the Armoury today. We're talking about CRM. We're talking about how you manage your database of customers, but also leads in a way in which you can market better to them to gain more business and get better return on investment for that data that you contain. Please, if you've not asked any questions already, get them in the message box. Share any experiences you've had, or if you've got any direct questions for me or James, please put them in, and I'll ask them of James. This will be on catch up as well, so you'll be able to go back through some of the content we've gone through to make any further notes if you've not been able to get everything captured down from the live session. You mentioned something about segmentation, and for those watching today, they might not be familiar with the term. Could you just explain what you mean by segmentation, and then talk about a little bit more detail about the value of it and what it brings within the CRM?
Completely. So segmentation is the principle of putting people into boxes. So it's the bit we're told not to do on a day-to-day basis in our daily lives. Don't put people in boxes. But actually, from a CRM perspective, it's the one thing you absolutely want to do. So let's take a simple e-commerce business. And I relate to that. It's quick and easy for me to come up with examples in these scenarios. So ultimately, we have a number of segments that we'll put in place by default when we start a customer off with their CRM program. One is all customers, people who have purchased whenever. All prospects, people that have never purchased but have given you a certain level of information. We then go through things such as single order buyers. They have bought once but have not bought again. Multi-order buyers then get broken into they've bought 2 to 5 times, 5 to 7, etc., etc., etc. And then we get kind of the VIP segment. So they are people that have bought the most frequently, they've spent the most, and also are the most engaged with you as a business. Now, there's some very, very simple segments. Now, they're very, very simple. In fact, there are some really complex things we can get into. But what it does is put people into effectively contact boxes, or what we call in the industry cohorts, groups of people that appear to have a similar behavior or have done things over a point in time that intimate they could have a similar behavior. So therefore, it means that we can do two things. One is we can choose to include or exclude them from communications. And the second thing is we can choose to tailor the conversation and the communique going out to those users in order to make it as relevant as possible. So therefore, let's take prospects versus customers. That classic nationwide ad of new customers only. You've got these offers that go out to specifically new customers. We want the 10% off your first order conversion. We want to test 3 for 2 on your first order. We want to test free shipping on your first order. That gives us the ability to say prospects, never bought. I now want to convert those people. So what am I going to put in front of them? Customers got some great new in product. Brilliant. They've bought shoes before. They've bought and they've bought shoes. Here's some new shoes. Okay, simple answer. But it means it gives you the ability to make it relevant. So there are kind of 3 building blocks that I talk about. One is effectively building the bedrock, setting the basics. You've then got profitable growth, which is the ability to scale still within a profitable boundaries. And the last one is where CRM really comes in, which is efficiency through relevancy. You're making it really relevant for the user and actually really efficient for them to digest because it hits their core. It touches on those triggers and the things that they're used to seeing. So segmentation allows you to be really efficient in the ability to send stuff out, but also really efficient for the user to consume it. And segmentation takes time and effort, but it pays back dividends. And that's where your ROI goes from 20 to 1 to 35 to 40 to 100 to 1.
And one of those things, I mean, we've covered a lot here, and someone might be listening to today and thinking, okay, where do I even start? Now you're moving on to segmentation. There's a lot involved here, and any IT platform that you're introducing or system, there's work involved. So We've gone quite deep into this now by looking at even things like segmentation. Let's bring it back for those listening that haven't even got a CRM. What would you say are the starting points of being able to effectively improve a CRM? Because I've seen this in businesses. There's a great idea by the sales director or sales manager. Let's put a CRM in, and a year down the line, a load of money's been spent and no progress has been made. What would you say are kind of the key steps to actually start seeing some traction with it as a project and make sure that project is implemented effectively and efficiently?
Okay, so let's start with the rule of something better than what you're doing at the moment is 10 times better than you're doing at the moment. Okay, that's the crappiest thing I've released recently, but there we go. It's anything you can do to improve the relationship with that customer is better than you're doing today. So don't try and build something that'll take 3 years to implement and continuous development. That's not what you're after. So what you want to do is start simple, keep it simple, stupid. So start with the most important thing of bringing together all the sources of your data from around your business in terms of customer data into one place. So finding somewhere and something that can hold customer details, prospect details, name, address, telephone number, email, mobile phone number, team, within the team in terms of who are your contact points, who are the influencers, who are the decision makers. So you have a contact database effectively. The second piece is understanding the quality of that data. How do you enrich it? So how do you add things to that data set that enable you to then be able to make some decisions? That means things such as, when did this person last have a meeting? What was the last email that this person sent? Where are they in the life cycle of purchasing? Are they a prospect? Are they a customer, an active, best, VIP? Are they an influencer? Are they someone that expands your reach by introducing you to other brands, for example. Are they a partner? So you're just finding, so one of the most important things is to identify probably no more than 5 or 7 key criteria you want to know about that company or that user that you can then use to segment. Let's not generate 15 to 30 variables. This person likes cheese, they prefer cheese on Wednesday. It's pointless. Not going to really help you. The most important thing that we see from brands that don't get CRM right is culture. So the cultural change of helping a team or a business understand that building a CRM and spending the time entering this data will save them time tenfold further down the line. The biggest friction point and barrier we often get within sales teams is, one, they can see everything I'm doing. Well, yeah, we kind of want to, and because it's our business. And 2, that, this is going to take me forever. Why have I got to enter all this data? It's so dull. Well, to be honest, where have you got it at the moment? If you haven't got it right now and we need it, then we need it. So you're not doing your job properly. So there is a bit of how the culture, that's quite blunt by me, but in a nice way.
By the way, I like the impersonation.
Thanks, really lovely. I can do quite a few. There's how do we get people in the business on the journey and the cultural necessity of building this together? So how do we help them understand that using this tool, they will sell more, they will convert better, and they will find the right conversation to have with that prospect they haven't talked to for 6 months and have since forgotten everything about them? It's all there in the system for them to go, well, actually, yes, I talked to them about this last time, and how does that allow me to talk to them properly this time about this product, this service, or this new baby that's just arrived? For example, it creates a touch point, doesn't it, Phil? So the cultural change for me, for anyone that doesn't know, Phil has had a little girl very recently and is doing incredibly well to be up at this time in the morning, having had no sleep. So for going back to the 3 things, for me, they are: start small, don't try and ball the ocean or every other buzzword that you want to create data and bring it together and try and clean it, give it some quality. And the last but most important one is start to understand how you need to bring the team and the business along with you to see this as an integral part of what they do, not something that's going to really cause them. It's not a sales prevention tool, put it that way.
That's a great point, because, and I've seen this in businesses, that the CRM can offer so much, but the people element is forgotten a little bit. And that's where the project stalls, doesn't work, the people buy in. And getting the sales team involved very early on in the process, I've seen from the businesses I've worked with, be a really effective way of doing this. Yeah. We've even done things like, and I'm sure you've seen it, James, by having like CRM champions within sales teams. So having users that become the part of the development process as well, and system changes and suggestions around what need to be changes. Having said that, and I'll put a caveat with that, getting the sales team to put loads of ideas, and you're going to smile at this point, getting the sales team to come up with loads of ideas of how they can improve it will just create unnecessary workload and loads of changes that don't work equally. Okay, yeah. There's balance. But I think getting that cultural input and buy-in to it is so critical, because the data and the output that you get from the CRM is only going to be based on what you put into it.
Yeah, it's that classic French phrase, shit in, shit out. That basically you do put rubbish into a system. That's all you're going to get out the other side. You can't make decisions off the back of it. You don't know whether you've made the right decision, and actually you don't know whether the outcome's actually feasible or not, or actually is giving you the right numbers. So it has to be good quality. I think the point about a champion is fantastic. Some of the best champions I've found are the ones that were the biggest dissenters going into the process. The ones that were, I don't want this is horrible. And you pick them specifically to go, if I can turn you around and you can become the voice, because they're often the most vocal within the team as well, and the one that everyone either listens to or just can't help not hearing, then it's really important. They can often be the biggest advocate coming out the back of it, because oh yeah, saved me hours, this is amazing, look at all this stuff we've got, and I sold more than I did this last month. So it can work incredibly well. Really important to find that person.
The other thing it just made me think about, and I did this as a piece when we were implementing our CRM, was about reviewing the sales process and the marketing process before you implement the CRM. I think it's very easy to get lost in the integration of it if you haven't defined your sales and marketing process. You kind of end up making it up as you go along. And I know that what we benefited from was actually stepping back and saying, okay, we've got a sales process, marketing process in place, but let's use the opportunity to review it. So the CRM that we're choosing is based on where we're wanting to go and what that process looks like. Otherwise, you can quite easily get caught out within that, can't you?
Completely. Yeah, we've just gone through quite a major overhaul of Casio's calculator process. So going through their entire, they own about 86 own. They have about 85% of the UK calculator market. And one of the big parts of what they do is emulators. So teachers and people can download an emulator and mimic that solution on their computer screen for teaching. Now, that process was probably around 25, 30 steps, all built within a HubSpot CRM, still is. But I think we've managed to get it down to 4. Just by looking at it and going, you're overcomplicating it. You're catering, these 20 steps are catering for the 1%, which in fact can probably be dealt with better over a call and convert that 1% better than you would have done if you just left it automated. So reviewing your sales process is massively important and can give massive benefits and make it super simpler for the customer, and therefore your conversion goes up.
Yeah, that's made me think about something that I use within coaching, which is the principle of systemize the routine, humanize the exception. I think if you're not careful, it's very easy to get bogged down with the CRM and try and systemize everything. Whereas if it's the 1%, humanize it. Just thinking about that from your experience, what are the key components that still offer huge value when they are humanized? Because, we all get it, don't we? We get bombarded with pure automated emails now coming out, even with personalization. But there's huge value within that humanization element, of actually having a conversation and doing something different. So where do you see within the sales and marketing process that still being of key value at key touch points?
So I absolutely see, I'm a massive believer in personal touch points in terms of that communication process. It's so important. And actually, if we think around the last 2 years and some of us being starved of that personal contact within a business environment, we're not, we're quite not a rare exception, but our team are usually all based here in this office in Norwich. And the communication flow is fantastic. But actually, we're working from home for a week as we migrate and move offices. And it's all too easy to let those personal points of contact drop. So if we think around how that fits into a sales process, for me, the most important bits are the initial outreach, which is where most people automate. And actually, I personally believe a more human element coming into that process will give you the best conversion into what we call a marketing qualified lead. Then the automation can take over to a certain degree to nurture that person through the process of, here's some great documentation you might not have seen to give you a little bit more information in terms of what we do. Here's some relevant case studies because you've just visited the Shopify part of our website 3 times in the last week. Great. Well, let's trigger off a workflow to give you more information on Shopify. And then the most important point where the humanization comes in is fairly obviously the sales closure process, getting them from a sales qualified lead into a proposal format. So therefore, tailoring that proposal, making sure it's really relevant and not templated to a huge amount. So therefore, it feels to the user as though it is actually relevant to them. And then again, from proposal through to closure, automation can help take over in terms of, have you had your proposal? Have you looked through it? Have you had the time do you want to schedule a meeting to talk through any complaints or thoughts or changes? And then when you close the deal, automation can then take over again in terms of, fantastic, welcome aboard, isn't this fantastic? Here are the 3 things that are going to happen next, which also means it's consistent. As we went back to that point about 10, 15 minutes ago, that consistency of, here are the 3 things that happen in your first month of joining us as a business. That is automated. You then take over with the personal approach again. So the 3 elements I see as being really key for personalization are starting that process, finding the right people and communicating initially with that person. You've got the point of taking them through a proposal and making sure that's as tailored and perfect as possible, matching their needs. And the third part is as you onboard that customer to make sure that experience is as personal as possible, giving them that human touch point of, we're here if you need us.
It's a great thought because and that point that you made, that it's not either or. It's not a case of it's either going to be all manual or automated. It's a balance in the 2 together, and realizing that within the sales process is a great learning for everybody. If you've got any questions coming in about CRM, customer relationship management tools, about how you can manage your data, then please drop the questions in and ask them of James. And if you've got any questions after this that you want to follow up, then what I'll do is on the comment section, I'll include James's contact details so you can get in touch with him directly. Or if you want to pick up with anything with me, then you can do that as well. So we've covered a lot. What have we missed so far within the discussion? Let's kind of take a pause moment. What have we missed, would you say, that the audience could be listening today and thinking, actually, do you know what, we need to be making them aware of that, James? Anything so far?
I think one of the big areas is around dashboarding and reporting. How do we know what's working and what isn't? And I think that's probably really key, making sure that comes down to the data piece again. How do you capture the data, and how do you get into that culture of updating the system in order to know where you are in that journey of success? Okay, so you definitely have the need to build those touch points and build that data set within the system. I'm just conscious. Someone's just switched some music off in the background to me, which may be heard. So there's,
I mean, people might enjoy that.
It's a bed. In the radio world, it's called a bed. It's fine. No, I think the reporting and dashboarding bit for me is really, really key. Knowing where we are in that process and how it's stored and how we can report on what success looks like. That's incredibly important. The other piece, I think, which is probably worth pulling out is, I suppose, how do you implement it? Because we've talked about the culture change and the data in and the data out, but actually there's a couple of key steps which I think is often forgotten. You know, I talked about people just dive in and they stick it out by default, and there it is, plugged in. Oh, I've got HubSpot, great, thanks very much. Or I've got MailChimp or whatever. The bit that's often very rarely gone through, and this is often because in a business, this kind of mindset or this type of person doesn't always necessarily exist in many businesses, and that is the role of a business analyst. That is starting with the outputs. So what do we actually want to see? So if that's a report, dashboard, whatever that looks like, so going to your sales director and going, right, what reporting on a daily, weekly, monthly basis do you want to see? And then you start with those as an output rather than going to the sales director going, we're implementing a CRM, over to you. Which is pretty much what most people do. They go, or it comes from the sales director going, we're implementing a CRM, right team, what are we going to do? And it's a case of starting with the outputs and it's called in systems world regression analysis. You regress from the outputs to the inputs. And that's where you'll often get the extra fields and the extra elements that you need to capture within that data in order to then tell you whether you're successful or not. So that's really important. So starting with where you need to get to. The second part, go.
Well, I was going to say, just on that point, because my previous life as a sales director and sales manager, you know, you could end up getting management information for management information's sake, you know, and I've seen it before where we need a report on this and we need a report on that. Suddenly the dashboard is no longer a key dashboard. It's got like, you know, 30 or 40 reports, and actually finding the information you want is a real challenge. Is there anything that you would say, and this is going to vary by business type, but as a starting point that would be good for a business to consider about what information they should be reporting on? Or is it in every case?
No, there are, let's be honest, at the end of the day, some of the most important things you're going to track as a sales director or part of a marketeer's role is income. So am I hitting my sales targets? Am I hitting my number of converted leads per month? Am I hitting my average sales value for those leads? So therefore it's totaling up to my total goal revenue. Those are kind of three key metrics, which in a retail world will be turnover, orders, and average order value. The last piece, the other piece, which is really key, which is from a traffic to lead conversion, and from a lead to what I'll call is a sales qualified lead, one that has started a pipeline process. So from a prospect to a sales conversion, and then sales to sale conversion. So you've got three different conversion points. One is from how good is the quality of your data coming into your system to convert into a lead I might want to talk to you as a business. How good are you from taking that lead and turning that into a sales proposition, i.e. into your pipeline, into the latter stages of the proposal and into a proposal kind of scenario. And then from proposal to sales, what is your closure rate? And those for me are kind of three key parts of the funnel that you need to understand, and something that should all be tracked. So that gives you top line revenues, it gives you your number of sales per month, it gives you your average sales value, and it gives you your stages within the pipeline. The last part is the volume of people you're bringing into your business and are engaging with your business. That's not necessarily new leads coming in, but that's people that are visiting, using your email, using your SMS, using the marketing methods that you're putting out, and actively and positively engaging with you as a business. And that will be across channels. So that will be social, likes, comments, shares, all those kind of things, email opens, clicks, engagements, for example, and trying to bring that into some kind of engagement metric that shows how active your prospect and your customer pool is.
Good share. Really good share.
There's a couple on retention as well. So that's an acquisition. You've then got a retention element. So depending on the type of business, how long has your customer been with you? How many times have they purchased with you? What is their order frequency? What is their, we call it, so we have something called an RFM model, recency, frequency, and monetary volume. Which box do they live in? So therefore, it's kind of how good is that customer to you as a market? And therefore, what is the split between repeat business and new business? Because then it shows whether you're in an ever declining business, so you're just having to spend shitloads of money on acquiring new customers because you can't retain, or you're retaining so many customers that you're, let's call it, slightly laissez-faire and not really activating new customers because your sales numbers are good, but that's all coming from retention, which means you're not future-proofing the business by continuing to bring new customers into the mix. And if you can retain customers that well, why the hell aren't you bringing new customers on board? That's the other question. But lots of people have a sales target and they go, well, I'm close to my sales target and that's me done. Nice.
I think that's a great thought, because the key value of the dashboards is then what questions it causes or raises.
Exactly. Story.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. The data, is only one part of it. It's then saying, okay, so what is that really telling us, and then what do we need to do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing when we look at board level dashboarding. So I actively will show a board level director less information than I think they need. So I actively will show them a dashboard with content and say, that's all you need. That's all you need to know. Sales going up or down, or order value up or down, conversion up or down. And then underneath, the team have separate dashboards on each of those key metrics to see how they're moving. So they can almost see those first and start to understand why, rather than the constant conversation, which usually happens is you're giving a sales manager or a director or a board almost more information that they're asking minutiae that ultimately you spend half your life trying to chase, rather than trying to understand and effect change to the metric that they are seeing. And that's where it's really important to understand how dashboarding and data needs to change at the layer of the business in order to help movement happen. And that's a big cultural change, because usually board level directors have come up through the business. They love the detail. They love seeing massive Excel spreadsheets, and they love to pick a hole in that day, on that hour, in conversion. Why did we lose conversion on 11 p.m. last night? Well, it's because we upgraded our systems and we turned the system off, and okay, fine. But you've now spent 20 minutes going away and trying to find out why, whereas it's important so the team gets the data and the board gets the headlines.
Yeah, good, really good summary. Really good summary. We're coming up to sort of the conclusion of today's session. Let's just think about some top tips. We've got businesses watching today that will be all different sizes, different positions. Some will have implemented a CRM, it not gone well, or chosen the wrong CRM. Some haven't got anything implemented. Some might even have multiple CRMs, maybe using different elements for different sort of stages of the sales process or marketing process. What, in your view, would be, for those listening and from what you're seeing at the moment, 2 or 3 top tips around CRM, not just the implementation, but the ongoing management?
Can I break it down into the 3 different user groups? Because I think it might be helpful. So if we start with those that have not implemented yet, I think it comes back to that point we made a little while ago. Start to think around the goals and what you need to change, and what outputs you need from a CRM. What KPIs in your business does it need to change? So therefore, is it even relevant? And if you can answer that question, you can then find the right CRM to solve the key issues that you have. So start with what you need it to do, rather than starting to look for a platform. And that's really important, because CRM is actually a principle, not a platform. For those where it has not gone well, go back and find the reason why it's not gone well within your business, not is it the right platform or is it the right solution provider? Because usually that's the blame end of the game, when in fact going back to the culture and going, well, actually the brief was wrong. We didn't look at what we needed to actually generate or change the KPIs or the goals for that business. And actually we didn't bring the business with us. So it's just sat there for 6 months and languished and not done anything. And this to-do list is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger because we just want change. That for me is probably the most important piece, because it's usually not the platform or the solution provider. It's the inputs that you gave them and the decisions you made in terms of not making a proper decision around why you need it, and the culture of the business. I think that's the one thing. And actually, they're very simple to change. It just takes effort. And the biggest one, as we discussed, was that culture change. That is, if you can get that right, the rest will come. And then if you've got a CRM and you're thinking, well, where do I go next? How do I just make this better? Because I'm seeing some good results, but where do I go? It's starting to think around where you can start to save time. So not about how you can use more functions of the platform you've got. Yes, that's really important, but start with the 3 mantras of make money, save money, and drive efficiency. If you look at the efficiency piece, by using your platform to automate in the right way, you will save money. And through better engagement and relationships with your customer, you should make money.
Brilliant. Really great summary from you today, James. And I'm sure this is one that people are going to watch back again, depending on what stage they're at with their CRM, and think about what they can do in terms of changing things. We're going to do a session with the Armoury coming up in next month or so around branding. This is another subject matter in line with CRM I see come up time and time again is, do I need to change my logo? Do I need to change my branding? And often, I know you're smiling at that, James, because often people think branding is purely about the logo when it's much more than that, right? But I think it's a key subject, particularly for businesses that are growing and looking to scale. It's a key thing about, do I need to rebrand, and when is the timing to do it, and what are the right things to consider? So for those watching, we're going to do a session on that in the next coming few weeks. If you've got any questions from today, please put them in the chat area. I'll be monitoring LinkedIn and the other social media channels, and I'll be able to forward those on to James. I'll also include James's contact details within the comment section, so you can contact him directly. But James, I would like to thank you for your input today, and thank you for those.
You're welcome.
And we look forward to seeing you on the next LinkedIn Live.
That'd be awesome. Thank you, Phil. Been a pleasure, and speak to anyone soon. Cheers.